Emily Jacir Europa is the first institutional survey show of the work of the artist Emily Jacir. Jacir is an artist from Palestine who lives around the Mediterranean, and the focus of our exhibition at the Whitechapel here is looking at 2 decades worth of sculpture, film, photography, and the various media that has informed her practice, particularly focusing on, as the title suggests, her relationship to Europe. The first piece you encounter in Gallery 1 is a large-scale installation called Material for a Film. This piece seeks to tell the story of the Palestinian intellectual living in Rome called Wael Zu'atar. He was the first of a series of intellectuals who was assassinated by Israeli Mossad agents in the 1970s. Wael was an intellectual who made his living doing a number of different things. He wrote columns in the newspaper in Italy and Italian. He was a translator who at the time was attempting to translate 1001 Nights. He also made his living and made ends meet by being an extra in different movies, including The Pink Panther. The actual installation itself is an immersive kind of environment. We hear Mahler's Ninth Symphony. We see a series of book covers, which were all the books that were found in Wael's house when he was found assassinated. We move through the spaces and we see journeys where Emily herself has gone with Wael's partner, Janet Van Braun, and tried to photograph the local haunts, where he went for coffee, where he'd walk and get his groceries, the exterior of his apartment. What she started to do was to kind of look at him as a kind of lens or a figure by which to understand what was happening in Rome at that particular time. So what we start to see is Emily's intervention into his life and what that kind of says about Wael. He becomes alive through this installation. The act of silencing or the act of disappearance is something that resurfaces in this exhibition regularly. The installation Lydda Airport tells the narrative of the British's relationship to Palestine through the lens of 2 parallel historical tales. One was about a small plane called Hannibal who disappeared on its way from Lydda Airport over the Gulf of Oman to Sharjah. And also a story about an air traffic controller called Edmund Tummery, who was asked to wait for Amelia Earhart, who was meant to be visiting Palestine. And he was asked to wait for her with a bouquet of flowers. But as many of us know, Amelia Earhart was lost on her journeys around the world and never made it to Palestine. 2 stories of disappearance. This conveyor belt is in many respects a kind of analogy for the act of waiting that happens not only for many Palestinians but also for many artists and travelers who live often in exile. The act of transformation is something that runs throughout this entire exhibition. In Ex Libris, she is taking abandoned property, marginalia, and turning it into an animate library, a 360-degree installation where one can encounter various histories. In Change Exchange, Emily is taking material, transforming it into something else. Through 60 transactions, we see the erosion of capital, of this material of representation. This thing that once meant something that had value is reduced to nothing. Emily is able to transform materials so that they become reconstituted in a way that they speak to entirely new narrative histories, to entirely new stories that may have otherwise remained untold.